advise the opinions and views of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
You are what you watch. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for tuning in. Last week on our last program, and the week before that, 2 weeks in a row, I concentrated on a show bringing out the problems and the issues of independent auditors. As you well know, if you follow the show, what we were trying to do was to find out, because as the topic put itself out, leveling the playing field. Now, I promised we were going to do a third show with Congressman Durano, which is going to be part 3. Well, you know, with the impeachment going on in Congress, I guess current events have taken place. And rightfully so. A lot of events have taken place. Now we're going to jump, still in the financial field, but this time into banking. Now, I have to say, before we start the show, I am no expert when it comes to auditing, accounting. I'm not a CPA, nor am I a lawyer, and in finance and banking. However, there are specific issues that you and I need to find out, to be able to understand and analyze current events that unfold in front of us. Media plays a very big role. But like I keep telling you, me in my field and media, as we are doing right now, don't necessarily bring out the truth or what it really is supposed to be. The game is called PR, the game is called perceptions. Now, in our program, here, this is not edited. As you see it, as it comes, it is taped, yes, but it is taped as live, as if no edit except for the break. Now, what's happening? Let's see. The current events that have taken center stage. We have Banco Filipino versus the central bank. But hang on, is it really Banco Filipino versus the central bank? Or is it the central bank versus the Supreme Court, or what we call the judiciary? Ladies and gentlemen, just so you and I understand, in this system where we have what we call democracy, we are all guided by what we call rules. The rules of the game basically is created by Congress, wherein a constitution is put together, ratified with a sitting president who requires the mandate very much like the congressmen and senators. The judiciary are put in place. It's called checks and balances. Now, the role of the judiciary is to sit there and not necessarily create laws. They are there to arbitrate and to interpret these laws, as well as to judge against them when you have conflicting points of views. Now, it is not only the citizenry that is totally vulnerable to the system, it is likewise the institutions. Abuse is not necessarily, how would you say it, a franchise of one person being charged by another. It can be done by institutions. As you very well see in the last month, we have the big scam. Wait, hang on, it's been going on for 6 months. The Carlos Garcia scam. Let's see, the many, many scams that have been going around. Tonight, we will see unfold in front of us another issue that I think you and I better have a better understanding, or baka madala lang tayo ng kuro-kuro, or what we call perception, PR, and called the media. Our guest tonight is no one else but Attorney Perfecto Yasay, a man, a nation builder, who put his hand out, his whole body and soul, to be vice president for our country in 2010. Just because he did not win does not mean he stopped his advocacy towards helping the country. Previous to that, he was head of the Philippine Stock Exchange, and he is a very successful lawyer and an advocate to many, many humanitarian deeds and moves in this country. Now he has put himself on center stage for Banco Filipino. Why I don't think he needs the money. I don't think he needs the name. I don't think he needs the popularity. Let's find out. Our topic, let's see, the rule of law. Hello, Mr. Yasay, attorney. Salamat, nakapunta ka naman dito.
At maraming salamat din sa inyo, Harry.
You're so busy with what's going on and your name is all over. I hear you on radio nonstop. I read about you on the net as well as all the broadsheets. Attorney, what is going on with you? You are representing Banco Filipino and we have a problem with the central bank. In a nutshell, maybe it's best you explain it briefly first.
Yeah. Well, what's really happening to Banco Filipino is a problem brought about by the fact that the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas refuse to comply with the lawful orders of the court in so far as Banco Filipino being the banking regulator and carrying out its task as a banking regulator to protect not only the banking industry but also precisely depositors. Now, the courts have already decided and ruled for Bangko Sentral to do specifically in the exercise of its regulatory functions assists Banco Filipino come up with a business plan so that the illegal closure of Banco Filipino in 1985, which the Supreme Court declared as illegal, can be rectified and justice can be brought back. Where the Supreme Court said it is not enough that you just reopen Banco Filipino. You must give Banco Filipino the fullest support under the law so that it can operate with safety to its depositors.
So what you're saying, attorney, is let's go back to where it all begins. Okay. We all know Banco Filipino was #1 many years back. They're the pioneers of ATM. Subok na matibay, subok na matatag. Because I remember way back then that deposit dito, withdraw doon.
That's correct.
They were the pioneers.
Yeah.
And Tomas Aguirre, no less,
Yeah.
was a pioneer, innovator in the banking industry, and it was #1 bank. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to try go back in my memory. There was a big-time banker by the name of Jobo Fernandez who represented, hindi Bangko Sentral yun, it was the Central Bank of the Philippines. Of course, when the debts came on, they just simply traded names and got away with obligations. No? But
is
then
correct.
again, that was the dictatorship. So rules of the game were different. So Banco Filipino was, well, illegally closed. That's the position of Banco Filipino.
That's the position of the Supreme Court.
Yes. So lumabas finally in the Supreme Court ang nanalo Banco Filipino.
That is correct.
Now,
Yeah.
since then, sinabi ng korte, hey guys, government was wrong. The banking industry should not have done that. Banking regulator should not have done that to Banco Filipino.
That is correct.
So you guys, before redemption, ano muna, restitution.
That's
Di ba?
correct.
Correct what you've done wrong
Yes.
before we accept your sorry.
That is correct.
Yun ang role ng Supreme Court.
That is
Ano
correct.
nangyari sa banko? Because they changed names, naging Bangko Sentral.
Yes.
Ano, they just shed the obligation of Banco Filipino. That was some 18.5 billion, correct? Then.
The damage.
The damage
yeah,
then.
that we sustained. That is correct. Yes. Well, alam mo, when the Supreme Court rendered its decision in December of 1991 and it became final in 1992.
Final and executory.
Final and executory, we had a law, mayroon tayong batas na creating a new central bank.
Naging Central Bank.
Okay.
Bangko Sentral.
Yes. So, ang nangyari, well, the law is really entitled the New Central Bank Act. So, Central Bank pa rin. Binago lamang ang pangalan ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, which is the vernacular or Tagalog or Filipino translation of central bank.
Correct.
All right. Now, however, when the court decision came out, we still had a governor of the central bank under the person of Joey Quisha.
Quisha, yes.
Yes. And
who's still around?
Is still around, yes. And we immediately asked Joey Quisha, as the head of the governor of the central bank, to immediately implement the decision of the Supreme Court, which had become final and executory.
1991 yan.
1993.
93.
93.
Okay.
Yeah, 1992, 1993. Yeah. Alam mo,
Inupuan.
no, not only inupuan, he refused.
Wait. Ibig mo sabihin, mas mataas ang poder ng Bangko Sentral sa Supreme Court. I didn't realize na meron pa fourth player, ano? Na independent. May ganun pala, no?
Yun ang akala nila eh. Mas akala kasi ng ng central bank people at Bangko Sentral, Diyos sila eh. It was a big no-no to fight your regulator. You cannot do that. You have to always say, I'm sorry, kahit na sila may kasalanan.
So, are you trying to tell me Bangko Sentral is infallible? They are the God of all gods.
That
They're
is
above the law.
That is
They're
what they
above the
think.
president.
That is what they think they are.
And
Yeah.
then now, conveniently, the administration and the president says, I will not intervene.
Yes, because they say under the Constitution, you are independent.
Hindi ata maganda yan. Wait,
Yeah.
hang on. I don't understand
Yeah.
this. You mean to say that the central bank, the Bangko Sentral, is above and above all? That's how they're acting today.
That's how they're acting today. Yeah, they
And
just
that's
blatant-
basic argument of what this whole thing's happening
That
this
is
week.
correct, yeah. You know, we even got a court order from the RTC of Makati only last November of 2010
That the Bangko Sentral has
to comply.
to comply, yes.
Yeah, and this court order said that Bangko Sentral must immediately implement the rehabilitation plan that they had approved in favor of Banco Filipino as required by the Supreme Court, which they only acted on in
I think
2010.
there's a lot of people who miss that, no? Because
Yeah.
there's a series. Ang pinalalabas ngayon ng Bangko Pilipino is a totally different, Bangko Pilipino, ang Bangko Sentral, is a totally different situation and scenario on media. This is what I've been reading and hearing. It says that Banco Filipino is insolvent. You had a bank run, and you asked for X amount, and they said, we can't loan you the 6 or 8 billion because you're insolvent, because your depositors are small-time depositors. Kung ano sinasabi. Then I heard you
Yes.
coming out saying, hang on, guys. We're not even needing to ask that. You owe us the money to begin with.
That is correct.
And no less, not what I say, but Supreme Court, no less.
Uh-huh.
Hindi
So,
ata
yun,
maganda ito.
yun,
David
yun ang,
and Goliath to, ah.
yeah, yun ang ginawa. But you see what is more important, the court order was very specific. The court order said, since you approved already the rehabilitation plan, that was required by the Supreme Court even long
Previous-
before...
previous
yeah,
to this.
Yeah, previous to this
20
problem.
years halos.
Yes. The Bangko Sentral was also prohibited from doing any action even under the guise of regulatory measure that is aimed at destroying Bangko Filipino, closing it, or any action whatsoever that will prejudice or damage the bank, including this smear campaign, which it has orchestrated.
Before we go to the present,
Yeah.
which is the
Yeah.
smear campaign. So all this time, Banco Filipino refused to heed the call and the power of the Supreme Court, no less.
That's
So regardless, as far as they're concerned, they're above the law. Is that what you're saying?
This is what I'm saying. At least at this point in time, we're only talking about the reaction of Governor Quisha in 1992.
Isn't
when-
that dangerous? Because we're looking at applying him to some new position. This government, this administration is looking at putting him somewhere else. And he abused the law by saying, no, I'm higher than the Supreme Court. In
That's-
essence, that's what he
That's
said.
what he's saying. But that's what he did. He refused without, you know, it was a very terse refusal on his part.
Is there a recourse to that, attorney? You're a man of a legal profession.
Yeah.
Meron bang recourse dyan?
Well, the recourse that we took
Unusual, eh.
at that point was that because in 1993, the Bangko Sentral already came into existence to take over as successor in interest the functions of the central bank. Therefore, we
But that's only
pivoted.
intellectual trademark. It's one and the same beast
Yes,
with
that-
a new name.
That's right. That's why we made our appeal this time to Governor Singson, who is a lawyer and who fully understands the implications of the decision of the Supreme
Bakit
Court.
si Quisha, hindi abogado si Quisha?
Hindi ko
CPA.
alam kung abogado, but apparently by his adamant refusal to implement the Supreme Court decision, mukhang hindi abogado. Yeah.
And I don't understand the Supreme Court does not have that power to compel the institutions to do right.
Oh,
when
the
they
Supreme
see-
Court has the power of contempt, and Governor Singson recognized this.
So there was improvement.
There was improvement in the sense that when Banco Filipino was finally reopened in July 1 of 1994
Yes.
under the auspices of
That's why it reopened.
yes,
Okay.
it reopened.
Pero kulang pa rin ang rehabilitation.
That is correct because yun ang sinasabi ng Korte Suprema, hindi lamang sapat na bubuksan ninyo ang
Oo.
Bangko Pilipino.
Tama nga naman.
Dahil damage na ang
damage.
damage na at that time when we reopened.
Tsaka sumara kayo ilang taon.
Yes. At nawala yung 4 million depositors namin. Napakalaking deposit base
4
yan. Ha?
million.
4 million, nawala yan. Zero. When we reopened, we had to start from scratch. We did not have any new depositor.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
yeah. So, pinondohan nyo na naman yung bangko.
Pinondohan by 4 billion.
So, kayo pa naglabas uli ng pera.
Yes.
Kayo na na-damage.
Yes.
Tapos kayo na nanalo sa kaso at sinabihan na ng Supreme Court, other than approving the rehabilitation plan, bayaran nyo yan.
Yes.
And then they just refused.
They just refused.
I'm sorry, I don't understand this, attorney.
Me too.
Is that possible?
It
Ano
is-
tayo? Are we still in a dictatorship?
Yeah, this is, I think under the situation now, we're even worse. We're even worse. Because the dictatorship has only been dismantled in paper, but the violation of basic rights and
That's
the due
right.
process requirements
Of all depositors,
Yeah.
all who lost out, those who are interested, not
Exactly.
necessarily the Aguirre family,
Exactly.
but the banking system.
Exactly.
If they can do this, they can do this again.
That is correct. You know what the Supreme Court said? And I'd like to enlighten the public on this one. The Supreme Court said, hey, your closure of Banco Filipino is illegal because it is not insolvent. But more importantly, for the protection of the depositors and creditors, you must always explore possibilities other than permanent closure and
Yung basta-basta
liquidation.
na lang.
Yes, because if you the failure for you to do that and the failure of Banco Filipino will reflect on the failure
the system.
of the system and will reflect on your usefulness and viability. This is what the Supreme Court said very clearly.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a short break. But before we do, let me just recap that in this first part of the program, we brought you back to the beginnings or the history of Banco Filipino and the central bank, hindi Banco Central. Now, this was during the dictatorship. This was during to the strength and the muscle of then, let's see, big finance whiz, supposedly, of Jobo Fernandez. And then the turn of the century, or what we call our democracy in '86. And then the intellectual property trade name, which changed central bank into Banco Central. Now, there we have the people head of the institutions who refuse to follow what we call the Supreme and Absolute Court, di ba? Supreme Court. Now, this is where this whole thing begins. Now, when we come back, we'll take you to the current events that have been unfolding in the last 7 days. And if you think you're shocked, hold on to your seats. We're about to electrify. We'll be right back. Hello, my name is Harrison Watco. Our topic is the rule of law. And why not? Because I think we have a real issue here when it comes to the actual rule of law. We have with us the spokesperson of Banco Filipino, other than Attorney Perfecto Yasa. I call him nation builder in many ways because of his role, his advocacy in life towards this country of ours. Attorney, when we got off, I tried to summarize, but I think you summarized it best during our break. Maybe I'll ask you again to repeat that the Banco Central was overruled by the Supreme Court to pay damages based on the assessment and ruling of the Supreme Court. But the Banco Filipino hasn't even gotten to the stage of suing now Banco Central for damages because of what they actually done. Maybe you can update us on that.
The Supreme Court also after its decision in December of 1991, which became final in 1992, also said that Bangko Sentral is the successor in interest
Of central
of
bank.
central bank.
Okay.
And because of that, it is liable for the damage that was caused to Bangko
pay
Filipino.
Bangko Filipino.
Yes,
Yan.
because of the illegal closure. It is now merely a question.
Illegal closure yun, yung issue na yun.
oo.
Sige. Yeah.
It is merely a question now of Bangko Filipino proving how much it sustained as losses.
So now Bangko Filipino, to prove it has sustained losses, will now go to court to sue.
Which we did, in fact, in 1995.
So in 95, you went to court against no less than the Bangko Sentral.
Yeah.
Hey guys, we're going to work out now how much it cost us on losses.
That is correct.
What's happened to that case?
Well, when we filed it in 1995, horror of all horrors, Bangko Sentral came up with the defense saying that it is not the successor of interest of the central bank and that it was not going to respect the decision of the central bank.
Above the law.
Again, another
But that
travesty
cannot
of
be,
justice.
No? But that
Yeah.
cannot be. The case will prosper. What's happened to that case?
The case has been stymied because the
Pwede pala yun? Pwede pagtulugan ng kaso?
dahil
Ang galing na abogado nila.
Sino pa abogado nila? The firm.
The firm, ay nako.
The most influential and the most powerful law firm in the country today.
Aha.
Yeah.
If the firm is involved, once again, the ice is in the pudding, or that it's all there. So you're telling me it is now politics versus the rule of law.
Yeah, it's now really, actually, yes, individuals who are playing politics with the security and protection that they should give to the depositors instead of sustaining and upholding the rule of law. You're right.
Ladies and gentlemen, I always call that in this program as influence peddling. That is what you call the real game of politics. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let's take it to the present. What's happened? In the last 2 weeks, you have been complaining that there's been a lot of rumor mongering that has been going around, which caused Bangko Filipino to have a bank run. Is this correct?
That is correct.
How did you figure out the bad press or rumor mongering that brought about bad press?
Well, first, let me give you a basic background. When we reopened in 1994...
Sige, you bring us to present first. Sige.
We'll bring you to the present. When we reopened in 1994, instead of helping us, Bangko Sentral made sure that they will close us again.
Aba,
As early as that.
that's not legal, attorney.
I
Ikaw,
know.
you're a man of the law.
I know. That's why
Hindi pwede yun.
we had to spend a lot of money here just to defend ourselves against the abuses of Bangko Sentral. We only have filed cases against the Bangko Sentral.
And I thought it was only Marcos who was our enemy.
But this
My
is what
gosh.
they did, you know.
So, continue. I don't know what to say. I didn't realize pwede pala ito eh.
Yeah. So what they did was they immediately set in motion actions under the guise of regulatory activity or measures to hasten another closure
Oh
of
my
Bangko
God.
Filipino. So what they
95
did?
yan.
94 when we
94,
opened, yeah.
yes.
So immediately when we reopened, after we reopened, what Bangko Sentral did was to demand from us the payment of alleged obligations that were incurred by the conservator of the Bangko Sentral in Bangko Filipino when we were closed in
Parang
1995.
PDIC.
Parang PDIC.
Conservator.
Conservator. Na umutang daw
Para mabayaran ng depositor.
para magbayad ng deposito, nagkaroon ng emergency loan, umutang daw sila ng 3.2 billion.
Eh di menos na nila. 18 naman ang
Yun ang
bayad sa
sinabi
inyo eh.
natin.
Yun ang sinabi niyo.
Oh, so yun ang sinabi
okay
natin.
lang yan. Sige, kunin
bakit
mo
hindi
yan.
na natin ano
Eh,
yan,
menos
no?
na lang.
Anyway, hindi nyo man naman ma-prove. We're asking, no? Saan pumunta yung pera na yun? Which depositors na binayaran yun?
Walang
wala
mabigay.
silang maibigay dahil nawala na raw yung record. So, hindi namin kasalanan yun.
Correct.
No? Because you have to prove that. But anyway, if we were not going to pay up, they were again going to smear us. They were going to come up with the press that hindi kami nagbabayad ng utang. And that was going to be bad for us. At the
Of
time,
course.
the attitude of the officials of Banco Filipino was, well, let's not fight our regulator. You can't fight City Hall. Yun
Yes,
ang
you can't
attitude
fight
nila.
City Hall.
Right. So ang ginawa ng Bangko Sentral was to force us to dasyon
So you're giving properties,
properties,
away.
yeah, which had a market value at the time of 12 billion to pay.
The 3.5.
The 3.2 billion. So
Wait, isn't that called robbery?
that's called blackmail to my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. Sige, continue.
All
Sige.
right. So ito nangyari. And then yung pinapilitan na kaming ganon because they knew that Banco Filipino when it reopened was still asset rich. We had lots of properties.
Eh, giri yun eh.
Yeah.
Matigas yun eh.
Oo. Na, kunyari, yung utang mo ng 3.2 billion, they will give your property, which are prime properties, prime properties, they will only give it a loan value of 25%.
Typical
to,
bank.
Ganon ang ginagawa
So,
nila.
dasyon and pago, kinuha pa
Yes,
ngayon.
oh. So dapat ang ginawa nila, anyway, dasyon and pago na ito, dapat siningil nila sa amin was only 3.2 billion of
Dapat.
properties. Oh, kung babayaran man namin yun, no? But ang hiningi nila sa amin, 12 billion
To replace the 3.5.
to replace the 3.5.
But insatiable appetite did not stop there.
They didn't stop there. What they did was, shortly thereafter, they start, like in 2002, they started smear campaigns.
Nag-umpisa na.
Oh, nag-umpisa
How do you mean by
smear
smear campaigns?
Yung PR man nila, for instance, na si Victor C. Agustin.
Cocktails.
Cocktails. Sa column niya, ang ginawa niya ay nagpalabas siya ng mga impormasyon na tagilid daw ang Bangko Pilipino.
Baka kayo hindi kasi kayo kumuha ng PR. Ba't pumunta kayo sa akin?
And, ang
Go
problema
ahead.
nito, PR ito si ng Bangko Sentral.
Damaging yun.
Very
Pag maglabas
damaging,
ka,
yeah.
damaging yan.
Yeah, and he does not deny it. He accepts that as fact. Na talaga,
trabaho niya eh.
Trabaho. So ginawa niya, sinabi niya, tagilid kami, bangkra na naman kami. We had to get another emergency loan of 3.6 billion.
Right.
Napipilitin kami. And then we put up again prime properties.
For that.
For that.
How much was the value of that na
Binigyan
naman?
na naman about 25% lang or 35% loan value. So we put up then addition. Gusto kasing gawin ng Bangko Sentral dito, kukunin muna yung assets namin para talagang
Ubusin ka talaga.
uubusin ka talaga. Okay.
Bring us up.
They continued on up to 2003. Sa
Okay.
2003, sinabi namin, teka muna, tama na ito. Kalokohan na itong ginagawa ninyo.
Abuso
You
na.
have to come up with the business plan na ini-require na ng Bangko, ng Korte Suprema. Ayaw nilang ibigay dahil hindi daw sila successor ni interest. Ganun na naman.
Ang tigas na naman.
Ang tigas na naman ng ulo nila. Until finally, in November 19 of 2009, the Monetary Board approved a business plan for us.
My
All right.
God, 14 years later. Oh.
Where they said that they will give us, as a centerpiece of the plan, a financial loan assistance of 25 billion payable over a period of 20 years and other regulatory reliefs. We accepted it right away.
maganda. Acceptable at this point.
acceptable. But there was one big problem. They said we should drop our damage case.
Ay, hindi pwede ikaw naman.
But
Hindi naman.
that's exactly what they did.
As a gentleman and
Yeah.
as a Filipino, to protect the rights not necessarily for you, but in the interest of the financial system, you can't do it. Don't accept.
Yes, but that's what they did. And to force us to drop the damage case, they again instigated, through Victor Agustin, another smear campaign, which forced us again to get an emergency loan.
This was last week.
This was in 2009.
2009, okay.
Yeah. Toward mga December na nga ito,
sige.
magiging 2010 na rin to. So, we got another 1 billion emergency loan and then put up another set of prime properties. They valued they gave a loan value of only 25%
Again, of the actual market values.
to cover a 1 billion.
So, 4 billion nilabas nyo, 3 billion,
Yeah.
para makakover ng 1 billion na.
Yes.
Oh, sige.
Right, yung ginawa nila. But this time, Harry, we stood our ground. we stood our ground. We said, you have to stop the bleeding of Banco Filipino. You have to make sure that the smear campaign would end. Because even as you would continue to give us emergency loans, hingi kami ng hingi, kung hindi nyo susugpuin yung cost ng bank run na ito that forces us to get the emergency loan, we will bleed to death.
Ang tawag dyan, crisis management.
Yeah.
Create the crisis so you can manage it.
Yes.
That's what they were
Yan ang
doing,
ginagawa
creating
nila.
their crisis. Sige.
Okay. Now, we went to court. We were forced to go to court dahil nakikita na namin yung pattern eh. Oh, nauubos na yung aming property.
Of course, of course.
Yeah. And they were now parang sinasabi nila ito na ang pagkakataon. So to finally close.
Coup de grace.
Okay.
Coup de grace na.
So what we did was we went to court to ask for a relief. And the court directed Bangko Sentral in November of 2010 to immediately implement the business plan that they have approved for us until the court
a year ago. Yes.
will be able to determine whether the condition that they had imposed is legal
Yes.
or not. In the meantime, the court also is specifically directed that Bangko Sentral is prohibited from taking such actions under the guise of regulatory measures but are in fact abuses
Yes.
to destroy and close Bangko Filipino and to prohibit Bangko Sentral from taking actions that would further damage and prejudice Bangko Filipino, which included orchestrating
The bank run.
the bank run.
The cost of the bank run.
Yes, that is
So
correct.
what happened between November and now, 4 months later?
4 months later, what the Bangko Sentral did was to start a smear campaign. This time, with no let-up. This time,
Iba na.
Hindi lamang si Victor Agustin nag-umpisa noon, pinalabas na nila sa tabloid. At lumalabas sa tabloid, sinasabi ng Bangko Sentral, tagilid ang Bangko Filipino.
You have copies, you have all this evidence.
We have that. We have that in evidence. Sinasabi, mismanaged ang Bangko Filipino. We can never be mismanaged,
Pwede,
Harry,
asset
because
nyo.
not only that, when we reopened in 1994, we had been under the strict supervision and monitoring of
No less
a
than
BSP controller. Not a single cent can come out of Bangko Filipino unless approved by the controller.
And now I heard you on radio just the other day saying you don't want them to come in because they're deeming, based on last night's internet report on the Bangko Sentral, they're already saying sarado na kayo.
Yes.
Sinara kayo.
Yeah.
Last Thursday and Friday. And then they want to come in now and take all your documents. Ayaw mo naman.
Ayaw ko. Bakit? We stopped it. We presented to the PDIC people na hindi nyo pwedeng gagawin ito. Because mayroon kaming, and we served them a copy of the injunction of the court. We paid a bond for it, 50
Yes, yes.
million
my God.
for damages that the Bangko Sentral will suffer if we are wrong in our case. But we did that. But you know what PDIC says is, we're acting independently
I
of
read that.
Yeah. But you see, the point is, PDIC is acting as a representative of the Bangko Sentral.
Yeah.
They acted on the basis of the Monetary Board resolution ordering our closure.
Correct.
Yeah. So at least in so far as coming to the bank to implement that order, they were acting as representatives of the Monetary Board, which the TR or the injunction prevented to happen. But they said no. Only the Court of Appeals can stop us with the TRO. Sabi ko, no. So we signed the intrusion papers, if I may say so, to close Bangko Filipino in very strong protests.
You have to do that.
Yeah.
Attorney, you're a man again in the legal profession. What options have you left? Because it seems the word democracy no longer applies here and rule of law has gone out of the window. Knowing fully well that there's a pseudo rule of law and obviously the political powers that are and be are siding with the institution that is the very institution that's going against the rule of law or the Supreme Court. What options have you left?
Well, today, we filed a case again in the Court of Appeals to question the legality of our closure.
Your patience, it's amazing.
Yeah, well, I still have faith in our justice system. Now, I hope that this time the court will act more expeditiously, knowing now all of the facts. And I hope that the Supreme Court will also see what's really happening, because their own decisions have not been complied with by the Bangko Sentral.
Is this issue between the central bank, Bangko Sentral, Bangko Filipino, is it political, or is this just poor judicial management or no police power whatsoever?
I think it's political in the sense that it carries out the personal or hidden agenda of officials of Bangko Sentral. In other words, they're doing this in disregard of the law and the supremacy of the law.
Knowing fully well what they're doing.
Yes, knowing
With
fully well.
intent.
Yes. Bangko Sentral, for instance, knew from the very beginning when we reopened in 1994 that unless they provide us with this rehabilitation plan and support that the Supreme Court required, we will never be able to be restored to where we were. They knew that all along. And so what their plan was to make sure that before the restoration of Bangko Filipino succeeds, they will be able to close us again. But the fact that I'd like to emphasize is that the requirement for a business plan has not been the result of any acts of mismanagement that happened after we reopened in 1994, or any acts that would have caused our alleged insolvency. We are not insolvent.
Ang linalabas nila, the cause of insolvency is Dorsey accounts.
Yes,
Di
that
ba?
happened after
70%,
1994. Yeah.
70% daw, puro...
Yes.
kanila naman ang pera to begin with eh.
But what Bangko Sentral is deceptively trying to conceal from the people is that this business plan was not asked of us or by us after we reopened. This is precisely the condition to our reopening.
Yeah, that was the condition by the
Supreme Court. So they could not put in an argument that nagwaldas kami ng pera after we reopened, because they can never sustain that.
Attorney, in this situation where you have a lot of bad intent and the law has already fumbled and the institution, the regulators, are continuing to fumble, and you're the consequence of the illegal, if not poor, or acts with intent to disrupt no less than the other banks should come to your rally. Correct me if I'm wrong. Should they come to your rally? Maybe that's a better question. Because it can happen to you.
Yeah.
They can do it to them.
Yes.
So ingat ka, Henry C. Ingat ka, Zobels. Ingat ka, George T.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Isn't that the message?
Well, that is what should happen. But again, you know, the Bangko Sentral, and I'm saying this to you as a matter of truth,
Yes.
that they have always acted with favoritism. They have their favorite banks. This relief that is being sought by Bangko Filipino, who has been a victim in the hands of its own regulator,
Cost naman kay Jopo Fernandez pa yan eh. Ninanakaw niya yung bangko noon pa eh.
Binigay yan ng Bangko Sentral sa mga ibang favorite banks nila na hindi naman victim of justice, hindi naman kailangan. At sinasabi pa, pay when you can.
How will you attack this issue? How will you address it now that we have identified it's political, not necessarily to the administration and politics, political within the regulators? How do you address the village bully?
Yeah. Well, this is precisely what we are going to the Court of Appeals for. You just will have to be patient in making sure that you are going to reverse what is known as the arbitrary, oppressive, and grave abuse of discretion that this
Naiintindihan
agency...
ba ng mga abogado dyan sa judiciary? Kasi alam mo, it needs a certain... you need to have a know-how of what's going, no less to be a CPA or a finance man.
Yeah.
It's not enough to be just the legal. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct, yeah. Actually, mga tao din yan, mga members ng ating judiciary, no? I mean, they have their own perception and, you know.
Yes.
As you said, this is a battle of perception as well.
Yes,
when you said from the very,
yes.
And this is precisely what can sometimes also frustrate the supremacy of the law, no? But this is, I agree, it is not only a legal battle for us, but really trying to reduce the legal arguments into readily absorbable form. Yeah.
Attorney, we're going to end the show very quickly. We as viewers, not necessarily the depositors of the bank, but people who care, who are body politic of this country, that care about our democracy, our security, our financial stability, no less, because one is always part and parcel of the whole, be it for economic, financial, political, security, whatever. What should we do? What can we do? We're not necessarily in Banco Filipino. We are not necessarily the depositors. We don't know the Aguirres. We are not, for example, with the Banco Central. But we're watching it unfold, no matter how media can create a misnomer or a misinterpretation to jumble it up because of the strength of money that create false perceptions.
Yes.
Now, in our program at least, they'll be able to identify the true nature as you explain it. What can we do? What should we do, do you think?
You know, I think very important is public opinion. All right? It's the perception of the public as to what is right.
Yes.
All right? And what is wrong. All right? This is a battle for public opinion. Now, having said that, it says a lot about what you can do, what the people can do.
What should we do?
Yeah, we should really voice out. We should really openly express, either to the even at least to the internet and to
blog if necessary.
Yes, in our own small way, to make sure that we openly criticize and expose and disagree and fight what Bangko Sentral is doing. This is the only way. Bangko Sentral, even our president who has not taken action on this. In fact, in-appoint pa nga ng ating presidente re-appoint pa nga ng ating presidente si Governor Titanco na hindi pa nag-expire yung term niya. Yung term niya mag-expire pa siya sa July 3.
Inunahan pa.
Pero I am sure that the president will listen to the wave of public opinion. Pag nakikita ng Pangulo na ang public opinion ay galit sa Bangko Sentral dahil sa pang-aabuso na ito, abay talaga marami magawa ang publiko. We cannot be helpless here. I think magkakaisa tayo, gagawin natin yan. It is going to work. Isipin natin, kagaya yung sinasabi nila, one small droplet can form part of a pool going into the river and then going to be part of a great and vast ocean. No? Dapat yan ang gagawin natin. This is the hope and optimism that I have. And I know that in the end, justice will prevail.
Thank you very much, Attorney. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. You heard from the first part of this show the history as we built up to the current event. You heard at the last part the appeal of Attorney Perfecto Yasay. Don't forget, this is the very same man who put his leg out, who put his neck out there during the elections because he believed very strongly. He was with the Kapatiran Party. He believed,
Bangon Filipinas.
Bangon Filipinas. He believed singularly, wholeheartedly, that leadership is required in this government of ours. Now, you heard the appeal. I'm not sure I know anything else, but you know, if you and I just sit there and watch each other on TV, as I watch you and you watch me, alam mo, if we let them do it to this back, and we let these big taipans, so to speak, and the regulators to go and hobnob with each other, then we create a community that will create what you call power and the power absolute. And you know what they say about that? It corrupts and it will fall apart absolutely. So, as we see it to be the proper body politic and to be the responsible citizen, it takes you and I to actually create that action. And unless we have that volume, babaliwalain tayo ng industriya natin. So what do? Well, talk to your banker. Talk to your media people. Talk to your priest. It's not always the RH bill that's always being argued about. Hey, it's called our freedoms, our democracy. It's called our rights as a citizen. It's called, can you imagine kung mawala ang pera mo sa bangko, tapos kung anong pagbibintangan? And be careful about what you read. Be careful about what you hear. And be careful of what you watch. That's how I always open this show. Ladies and gentlemen, there you are. That's the truth about Bangko Filipino and the issues behind it. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.
Thank
sir.
you, Harry. Thank you very much.
You are what you watch.